Hey, so today we're going to be doing a VOD review on Power of Evil. It's going to be Optic versus CLG. Power of Evil will be on Syndra, and Crown's going to be on the Corki with Meteos playing Jarvan and Wiggly playing the Sylas. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about mid lane fundamentals. We're going to talk about how the fundamentals in mid lane and what these professional players do to actually play the game at a high level, and how you can take those concepts and try to just translate them into your own solo queue games. We'll also talk about what kind of mistakes are made in solo queue and how you can prevent them with just basic fundamental movements inside of the mid lane. We already see Corki's Q come out, and at this point we know that Power of Evil responds again to it with another Q. And now at this point we're just going to see Crown back up, and the reason he's going to back up is because he's on cooldown right now, whereas Power of Evil is coming off of cooldown. And we're already just going to go ahead and dive into it. This is something very fundamental inside of mid lane, where because there is a cooldown discrepancy between the two champions, we're actually not just going to move up and have Syndra hit us with the Q. So we're just going to wait, and then Syndra and Power of Evil is just going to look to move up and try to pressure. And one thing I see a lot of low elo players not do is just simply move up after a cooldown is being blown, in which then they can simply pressure. And although yes, you can argue that the enemy just has to move back, it doesn't matter, because eventually they're going to simply crack under the pressure. Because if you just keep making the optimal movements, lower elo players cannot keep doing this over and over again, and eventually end up taking really bad trades, which all in all just help you win the lane even more. So already Crown ends up just backing up, doesn't really look to contest the wave. Obviously autos the wave, but doesn't fully shove the wave because he doesn't really have the ability to do so. Again, Power of Evil throws the Q here. And we can see another thing, and we can talk about lane openings. And in this case, we can see how Crown actually moves into the lane versus how Power of Evil actually moves into the lane. Now, let's say that Power of Evil was versus a champion like, let's say, Xerath, right? Or let's say champions like Ari. Any champion that basically has the linear skill shot and wants to push the wave against most mages or most ranked champions just to get the level 2 advantage, and then look to control the wave accordingly. We could actually see that if this was the case, that if Crown was even you could even equivalent to Skorky, if Crown wasn't on cooldown, Power of Evil wouldn't actually just move into the lane like this, because what ends up happening is there are two goals. The first goal is to push the wave. The second goal is to get an HP advantage on the enemy. Now, you want the enemy to basically take either this advantage or this move. And these are two very different types of openings that we're not going to get into too much right now. But what you want to do is you want to avoid, and you want to force Power of Evil to either take an opening in where he has to either hit you with the Q, or he has to hit the wave with the Q. And that's why Crown is actually moving away from his minions, forcing him to hit him. But if he ends up hitting him, then Crown actually ends up getting the push advantage, which is really bad, because then lane tempo actually ends up dropping. And then we can talk about how and when to push waves in accordance to when your jungler is actually going for potential scuttle crab takes and etc. Anyway, so we're going to see Power Wheel just move, just auto, just push the wave. He's on cooldown. Corki is actually off cooldown now, so we're going to see Crown maybe make a move, but we know that he can't just contest the wave that easily. And you can see he's just pushing the wave in at this point, trying to get those autos in, not really doing too much. Always looking to contest autos. And now at this point, what are you thinking? Crown's looking to auto. Crown's taking the left side pocket. Crown knows that the enemy jungler actually ended up starting on the right hand side, or sorry, on the left hand side, because we see the blue buff being open. We know that Crown's going to retain left side pockets for a longer time, because by the time that the game timer hits around, let's say 3:15, that Sylas is actually going to be back on the left hand side, whereas the enemy jungler, who is J4, would be back on the right hand side, in which now you can again play relative to where your junglers should be. Crown, just playing off of cooldowns, tries to get the auto, and already you should just be thinking, okay, Crown's going to try to get the auto. Now, Power of Evil can do one of two things, right? The first thing he can do is actually just move up, and he could look to auto or Q Crown, and then Crown can respond with the Q, in which then Power of Evil can then just look to dodge it. Or he can just simply hit the wave and then keep pushing him in. So we're going to see what he does. My take would just be to push the wave and not actually respond to that hit. That's exactly what he does. He just pushes the wave here, dodges. Notice how he actually dodges. He ends up coming from the, he ends up clicking very close to his champion when he's dodging. So just take a really close look at his mouse movements when he is playing the lane. Corki ends up trying to throw the Q, and a lot of low elo players, they dodge like I don't know what they're doing. Their clicks are all the way down here, or their clicks are all the way up there, not close to their champion. And then if you do that, you're not gonna move quick enough. So we can see that the pro player clicks relatively close and ends up reacting a lot faster to most of the movements. We also know that Jarvan is on the left-hand side, and now we can see that Crown takes a right side pocket. I mean, we literally just saw Jarvan, but against a champion like this, when you know he's gonna take the level 2, you want to be looking to you can enter the lane really through any angle. Obviously away from the minions because of how Corki works, but then you have to take the pocket that is away from Jarvan, because Jarvan started on the left hand side, and this is a possibility, and this is a possibility. Then we can just take the right side pocket, and this is exactly what Power of Evil does to just completely negate the incoming gank that's happening like right about now. We see Jarvan coming in right now, and again, a pocket is being taken in where he is completely safe, and a lot of solo queue players, they end up standing here. They end up getting chunked, they have to then recall, and then Crown actually, or not Crown in your case, just any random Corki player, or Xerath, or Ahri player, or whatever player, ends up pushing the wave, gets the bounce back, and then has a really good lane state relative to, when, Jarvan's going to look to potentially gank you again. But again, so like you have to just realize pockets really allow you to just conserve HP. And now we can also talk about potential invades. Now if an invade happens where a vertical jungle is then initiated and Jarvan, instead of going into mid lane, ends up going just back onto your left side jungle, we can actually just assume that Sylas in this level, at this level of play, is just going to do the same, in which then the right side pockets are going to be like a permanent thing for us, because we're just going to retain these, because we know that by the time that Sylas ends up going into the right side jungle, not eating the Gromp, eating the 2 wolves, and then taking the blue, his right side camps will be back up, in which then you can again take the right side pockets for until like maybe 6 minutes into the lane, and then depending on how the jungle matchup evolves, maybe we take the left side pocket, or maybe not, but it really just depends relative to what the clear timers are. And yep, so he flashes, which is pretty bad, I'd say. That really sucks. I don't really know what else he could have done. Maybe he could have walked. See, like, yeah, Meteos is level 2. Maybe he could have just walked downwards, but maybe that it just feels like it's too late for that, because if he should know that this is coming. So I don't quite understand why he doesn't just immediately press the ward. This is again also something you can just do against Jarvan, against champions like Xin Zhao, champions that just want to get the level 2 onto you, is just place the ward here, and then you're obviously going to see him coming. So I don't know, Power of Evil doesn't really do that, but it's not really a massive big deal, although he does lose flash, he ends up moving forward, and I think he just can't really do anything here to really avoid this, which is really sad. Ends up flashing. He knows Corki can't respond, because if Corki responds, we know that the jungler is here. And now, what does this do? When Meteos ganks Power of Evil like this, we know exactly where Sylas is. Sylas is on the right-hand side of the jungle. And the reason for this is because Power of Evil actually moved this way. This is something that you can, again, do in your own games when you're not fully sure where the enemy jungler is. If your enemy mid laner is taking a specific pocket, and let's say this is like post 5 or 6 minutes, you can just assume that they are going to be playing relative to where the jungler is, in which then you can just respond accordingly, right? Also, if they're running in that direction, you can just assume the enemy jungler is there, so obviously don't chase. Again, we see the Q come off, and now we're just going to try to get we're going to look for an E auto, but I don't really think you can do that onto him right now, so it's just a patience game. We're looking to again attack him on every minion. We see that Power of Evil goes for a minion, Crown responds with a Q, and now Power of Evil should just respond with a QE. Doesn't do that, ends up just actually dodging it. Oh, I didn't even notice that you could just dodge that here. We know exactly where J4 is, though, and you notice again the pockets that Power is taking. He's taking the left side pockets relative to where Sylas could be next. Doesn't end up, nothing really ends up happening here. Again, you should just be looking to Q. Just wait for, again, this next minion that's Crown's gonna hit. We're just gonna see Power of Evil try to respond with a Q, try to hit Crown, punish him for every single minion. Again, in lower MMR, this is what really deciphers low elo players from high MMR players, is the ability to actually take this kind of movement inside of the lane, and where you're forcing yourself up when Crown is going into a last hit. And I mean, I've seen Platinum, and I've seen Diamond players, and I've even seen like mid Diamond players, so like D3, D2, or even like high Diamond players like D1 Masters do this. but they don't do it at a consistent basis, and that's what ends up deciphering you from a better player, because this in itself is just a form of refinement, where if you can just constantly back up when there's a cooldown, push in and punish for a CS, then you're just going to get much better at lane. It's going to be a lot cleaner. We see PowerofEvil responding with a QE, ends up actually hitting Crown, which is really good. Crown can't respond, doesn't really end up happening, it doesn't really matter, and now he's just looking to contest the wave. Notice how, again, he throws his Q, backs up immediately, doesn't actually end up pushing the wave, obviously, because PowerofEvil does have the push advantage, but we're going to see how... Oh, no, it looks like Crown is just pushing in now. Again, we're off a cooldown. The E comes out, and PowerofEvil is just going to concede the lane and let it come into him here. And now he's just going to try to match autos with autos. This is really awkward. That should have never really happened. But wow, I think Midos is dead. Yikes, that was bad. Salas takes the right side pocket, and this is, again, really good. And you notice when he does this, very specific time and moment at which he actually does this. Crown is actually going for a last hit when he's doing this. Notice how Crown points his champion to the last hit. And that's the only time PowerofEvil actually throws out his QE, or maybe it's his EQ. I'm not even too sure exactly which way it is, but he ends up actually throwing the spell out there. And again, this is something that you want to be doing, is throw out your ability when the enemy goes for a last hit. Now, let's say you were a champion, like let's say Ari, for example, right? Well, if you're Ari, then, I mean, obviously you wouldn't be standing here, you'd be standing somewhere here. Then you could actually just immediately, as Crown goes for the last hit, throw the charm back up. Same thing with Xerath. Do the spell back up. Or even as a Xerath, you could just Q him at that point, right? Doesn't really auto, and the reason PowerofEvil doesn't actually end up autoing here, again, we are talking about just mid lane fundamentals and what actually makes a high level player versus a low level player. Because the W goes off, the Q goes off. If Crown ends up, because right now Crown's off cooldown, right? Crown has his cooldowns up. If PowerofEvil ends up autoing him, it's actually bad, because then these two minions might actually end up jumping on him, and this gives Crown a time to then respond with the ability. So we can just see, again, these professional players taking the fundamentals of constantly moving in and out with respects to what cooldowns are being blown versus, punishing on every single minion, while constantly being on the correct pocket relative to where your jungler is and where he's going to be going next. And again, this is all just refinement, right? This requires you to just be really, really clean at the game and be able to do this at a consistent basis. A lot of people ask me, what's the difference between like a lower diamond or a mid or like a middle diamond versus a higher diamond or a masters or even a challenger? It's just the ability to do stuff like this on a consistent basis inside of a lane, right? Without faltering. Again, he should just push this at this point. Just shove the lane. Just shove the lane. I don't know why he just shoved the lane. Forcing Corki back into the lane was bad. I mean, he shoves way too late. This is bad. Because what angle does Corki take? I don't even know. He just disappears. Oh, wait a minute. So he leaves this way. He leaves to the right side, circles back, and then ends up... Yeah. And then now here you just want to tether. And the reason, again, he should have pushed the wave earlier is because the next incoming wave ends up locking. So this is actually a mistake from PowerofEvil. So the correct call would have actually been to just simply shove the wave, because you look at the next incoming wave, you look at where Jarvan is. I don't actually fully even know. I think he's going back to his Raptors or something. But we can see that had he just shoved the wave earlier, this wave, these three minions would actually be right into the tower. Instead of having locked here, and now PowerofEvil is forced to simply use mana to break this incoming wave, and then forcing himself to play the lane in a very awkward angle for a longer amount of time, forcing himself to obviously play on the right-hand side, because this is all Fog of War, and we can assume that Jarvan's going to be here, if Silas doesn't, see him already, because I believe Gromp is still level 1 and whatnot, but, I mean, this is stuff you can just check. Right? Another thing you can definitely do with respects to jungle tracking is, let's say that the enemy jungler starts on the right hand side, which is quite evident from just whoever comes to lane. You could actually just see that, okay, well, if the jungler started blue at 130 and it took him like maybe 10 seconds with the leash to clear, so at 140 he starts Gromp, assuming that he shows on the left hand side with like 24 CS or a potential full clear, then you can assume that 140 plus potentially another maybe 10 seconds, 150, just round it up to 2 minutes, right? We can just assume that by 2 minutes plus 230, which would be the Gromp spawn timer, would be 4 minutes and 30 seconds, could literally just be back when the Gromp is going to respawn, in which that's when, what's his name, Jarvan's going to be back on the right-hand side, okay? So you can just do, you can look at the information you have, and again, I deciphered this by looking at, let's say, for example, again, he shows on the top side with a full clear. Sylas doesn't actually have any intel on the right-hand side, and he's not actually there. You know that he's full cleared. You can just assume when the Gromp is going to spawn, so you know when Jarvan's going to be back on the right-hand side at exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Going back to the lane, already kind of a misplay by PowerofEvil. Should just be shoving, and now because he's forced to play the lane and Crown actually just ends up locking the lane, which is more indicative of the fact that Jarvan is taking the left-hand side jungle route or jungle quadrant because of the pocket he's playing in against Sylas. We can see that he just locks the lane and just kind of hugs the wall there, and now PowerofEvil is forced to either break this wave, expend a ton of mana and cooldowns in which then Corki responds with an attack, or he simply waits, hopes to God that Jarvan doesn't end up coming and the wave just ends up bouncing back, which it eventually will, because we know that this is wave 3, right? Yeah, so this is actually, no, sorry, I think this is wave 6, sorry. So we know that wave 7 and wave 8 are actually going to bounce back right into PowerofEvil, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this is the good thing, because what ends up happening is he's playing the lane in a really awkward angle. So I mean, PowerofEvil is in a pretty bad spot inside the lane. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets ganked really soon. But as you can see, he's just looking to shove the wave. He should just shove the wave at this point, and then again take the right side pocket, because he knows exactly where Jarvan is. He's playing relative to where Sylas is, and Jarvan actually just may not show here. Again, this is a very good opportunity for Jarvan to just show, but it doesn't seem like that's happening. It does seem like it's going to be a vertical clear, so we might just see PowerofEvil take again the right side pocket from like more of a permanent stance, mainly because of the fact that Jarvan's on the left-hand side blue buff. And as you can see, this is something Crown is doing. It is literally just a wave management battle where, again, PowerofEvil makes another very vital mistake where he ends up not escorting the wave all the way into the tower, walks back, and now look what ends up happening. Crown actually just literally freezes the lane after killing the cannon minion. As you can see, Crown pulls the wave for a second time, getting another really, really good lane state, and now PowerofEvil is forced to stay, again, forcing himself to kill this next incoming minion wave, forcing himself to stay inside of a lane state where he doesn't really want to do that, and then it puts a lot of pressure on Sylas to really just hover, allowing Jarvan to simply just now play a mini chess game with Sylas to either say, okay, I'm either going to gank your mid, or I'm just going to take your blue, which is now, it's just in a really terrible spot, and this is a byproduct of PowerofEvil not immediately shoving the last two waves. Ends up warding, can't actually take the recall. Sylas does end up showing, but Crown just has such a nice lane right now, and it just really sucks, because now we can see that PowerofEvil can't actually do anything to Crown because he has no mana to do so, and now Crown can just play mana for mana, which means that if, let's say for example that Crown is sitting at like 300 mana and PowerofEvil is sitting at 300 mana, and Crown ends up losing like 150 mana, and or let's say that Syndra ends up losing like 200 mana. Well, it's actually a lot worse for Syndra than it is for Crown, because I mean it's Corki versus Syndra. Syndra's actually absolutely useless without mana. So you could play a game against Syndra's mana here, which again puts her in a really awkward spot. And that's about it. So we're actually only going to be covering this much inside of the lane, because I do want people to take their time and fully understand what makes a professional player, what are the fundamentals of a mid, how to actually play those fundamentals, and then put them all together in your own solo queue games to actually be able to improve at the game. That is it for now, and hopefully we'll see you guys next time for another VOD review. Bye.